Welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan from SportsMap. You can read their work on sportsmap.com and follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. Gents, this was an ugly game. Both sides not protecting their quarterbacks well at all. Another poor showing by the Texans O-line. On the other side of the ball, though, Houston's defense came up huge to take an important win and grab that tiebreaker from Indy. Before we get started, just a reminder, hit like on the video if you think Joe Mixon was the most important acquisition of the offseason. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see some better protection for CJ Stroud, and click the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops, such as our Texans Jets preview on Monday. When you're on the go, you can listen to us on any of your favorite podcast apps. So, guys, let's start with the defense. They got gashed on the ground by Taylor for 105 yards, but they had Richardson running for his life all day long. 10 for 32 on passing, 175 yards and 1 touchdown, but all kinds of chaos in the backfield, some poor throws, some good plays by the secondary. Charlie, we'll start with you. What did you see from the Texans on defense that made them so effective today in a game that they had to win?
Well, Daniil Hunter didn't earn all $20 million of his salary in the last 5 minutes of this game, but a sizable chunk of it he pulled in with a couple of sacks, consistent pressure. He and Will Anderson as bookends on that defensive line can raise holy hell. I mean, let's be real. The Texans benefited greatly from the fact that Anthony Richardson is absolutely terrible when it comes to throwing the football. You mentioned 10 for 32. He had to surge to finish 10 for 32 after being 2 for 15. And the single biggest play of the game was the interception late in the first half, which was just idiotic coaching the entire sequence by Shane Steichen. I mean, the last 2 Texans home games, Shane McDermott, very stupid for Buffalo at the end of regulation, setting up the Texans winning field goal, and then calling a timeout to get the ball very deep in his own end. And then, sure, we'll just throw every down with Anthony Richardson because he's so polished and smart out there. And credit to Jalen Petrie for jumping in to set up the Stroud to Dell. What a gorgeous throw and catch that was. But Hunter, right? I mean, we're not quite, almost now, 17-game schedule, so 8 out of 17 games. That's the signature Houston Texans performance from Daniil Hunter. But Will Anderson getting home as well. You know, the secondary, they just can't get out of their own way, it appears, from giving up one monster long pass anytime they're playing the Colts. The breakdown on that play was just horrific, but it was the only huge play that they gave up in the passing game. And I guess if you're on the golf course, you get one mulligan if it doesn't cost you the entire round. So the Texans will swallow on that one. But when you think how terrible Richardson is as a passer, that the Texans have had to squeak out a couple of wins against them, the Texans are putting the knot in juggernaut. But if you do it within the boundaries of the law and under the rules of the game, oftentimes in life, it's not how, it's if. And it's 6-2. The Texans have the second best record in the AFC, overtaking Kansas City for number one. It's probably going to take a lot, like including winning at Kansas City late in the regular season, but having the tiebreaker over Buffalo. Baltimore, as it turns out, isn't some world beater either. 6-2 is 6-2. Is 6-2.
Yeah, we'll take it. I know there's a lot of stuff, some concerns that we'll get into, especially when we get to the offensive side of the ball. But I'm happy, and this was an exciting game. I know there was a lot of, some poor play, but a lot of exciting stuff, crazy turnovers and overturns by officials and all kinds of stuff. And Charlie already hit on the defensive line, so I'm going to give some other guys some love. How about Eric Murray? We don't talk about him being a standout all that often, but I mean, how many passes did he break up today? He had a really nice performance, and boy, it sure is nice to have Lassiter back at corner. That makes a big difference, having him to go along with Stingley. And even though Petrie did give up that big play, he also had that interception that Charlie talked about. So I think that the secondary, they did some nice things today. And a lot of backups at linebacker that they're still dealing with these injuries. So, congrats to those guys to get out there and come away with the win, even though a lot of guys were banged up. Like Devin White got out there and played a lot. So there's a lot of good stuff to talk about from this performance. And I think one of the big ones for me is Kalen Bullock coming back in the game, because, man, if you lose him, you're already out Jimmy Ward. You need him to be able to play safety for you, especially short week. If he would have been hurt, what are the odds he'd be ready to go on Thursday? We'll talk about some of these other guys that got injured, especially Diggs. Doubtful that they're going to be able to turn around and play on a Thursday.
Shout out to Joel, who's listening to us live from Prague. So, hey, Joel. And shout out to our own Josh Jordan for predicting the score right on the nose, 23-20. And shout out to Joe Mixon for finishing with 94 yards rushing. Should have finished for 100, but that unfortunate passing play or backwards pitch cost him some yardage there. Let's get to offense. We mentioned the Swiss cheese protection. Kenyon Green benched early until his replacement, Jared Patterson, went down with what looks like a concussion. CJ Stroud throws for 285 yards and a touchdown, but wasn't exactly crisp, but you can understand considering the fact that he too was running for his life throughout the day. And then, Josh, you mentioned Diggs going down with that knee in the third. Charlie, we'll start with you. What did you see from the Texans offense today?
I don't have the official box scrambling at the stadium, but Mixon 25 for 102, right? Was his final rushing number. So he did eke over the century mark. There were dubious play calls both ways in this game. I mean, I think they had Dunce award goes for Steichen to Steichen, the way he handled the end of the first half. But running the pitch play to Mixon late, Joe Mixon had not fumbled since 2021. That was not a good pitch by CJ Stroud, but Mixon needs to get a hold of that ball, except the Colts defense, it's like they thought Stroud was dropping back the pass. So everyone was right in his lap right away. And the officials got that call right. Clearly Mixon and going for the ball. There's contact there with Odeyingbo. He was correctly down by contact. You guys will have to tell me, because not surprisingly, inside the stadium, they opted to not show the replays of the very late pass interference flag. Which was a huge call, obviously, to keep the Texans from having to kick the field goal, make it a 6-point game. The Colts have the ball with plenty of time and timeouts with which to work. Look, we've talked about that Kenyon Green is a bad football player. Right? The standard here is an NFL starting guard. First-round pick, number 15 overall, 3 years in a row. We talked about it in the preview Thursday. Right? Caserio blew that pick. I mean, he'd done a lot of good work, but there are offensive linemen all over the league taken after Kenyon Green who are competent offensive linemen. Kenyon Green is not one at this point. So he needs to be benched if you have anyone remotely viable. Right? You mentioned Patterson goes in the game and then ends up getting helped off the field. If they could find a Devin White to come in after just a couple of days practice and give them very credible linebacker play, they need to scour the wire. Maybe there's a reserve offensive lineman that you throw a late round draft pick to acquire before the trade deadline, because too often it's just a jailbreak. And if CJ Stroud was not a wonderful athlete, right, he's not quite the quick twitch guy that Anthony Richardson is, but he's a good thrower of the football, as well as keeping his eyes downfield and elusive. Right? You don't have to be mind-numbingly quick, Michael Vick quick to elude the pass rush when you sense it, read it, and can step up in the pocket, move within the pocket. Stroud saves their bacon so often in the passing game because their pass protection, it's just sorry for what it should be given the money they've spent on the two tackles. Juice Scruggs, second year, a second-round draft choice. Shaq Mason at right guard is a close to 10-year veteran. That's 4/5 of the offensive line that you expect to be somewhere from good to really good, and you add it all up, and it's more bad to really bad.
Yeah, Scruggs, you mentioned there. I noticed he got beaten by Buckner for a sack, and that knocked them out of field goal range. So that could have been another 3 points that the Texans had, or the game wouldn't have been as close as it was. And my other big takeaway on offense, CJ, he was a little off to start the game, but he was getting hit a lot. So I'm not all that surprised. But then he also just made some terrific throws on the run. He came through when you needed him to in the big moments. If I'm going to point to something that concerns me a little bit, it's that when they have to run and the other team knows that they're running, that they can't really do it. And we've seen that several weeks in a row. It's, Mixon will pop one off and real boomer bust with the run game. They get stuffed a lot. They get a lot of tackles for losses, but they also have the explosive plays that kind of makes up for it. But when it's crunch time and the other team knows you got to run the ball to kill the clock and win the game, Texans, they just have not gotten that down. So that's my biggest concern really with the O-line is Green and Scruggs. But who do they really have to go to? And as we mentioned, Jared Patterson, I doubt there's any way he's clearing concussion protocol by Thursday. So you're going to see Green in there again. We remember this is a Jets team that, they knocked CJ out last year of the game. So protection is going to be very big for them here. I mean, it always is, but especially knowing what happened last year. And I mean, Kenyon Green's going to get CJ killed. They got to figure out something.
Before we get to our MVP of the game, Charlie, give me your final thoughts. Both of you can give me your final thoughts on this game and how it sets up going into that short week ahead of the Jets matchup on Thursday.
Yeah, not many style points in victory, but it's not a beauty contest. Right? The late, great Al Davis, when his Raiders used to win, just win, baby. And one thing about the Texans under DeMeco Ryans, you're not going to win all your close games, but they play so many close games that I think there is a poise factor that they have. They're used to being in all these one-score games. DeMeco's clock management could certainly be called into question late in the Green Bay game, but it wasn't flat out stupid. Right? McDermott, the Bills, and then in this game, Steichen with the Colts, just absolute moron level stuff. The Texans good enough on both occasions to take advantage of it. And now you get a Jets team. Their season's basically over. Right? Losing to the Patriots 2-6 is there the pride check of playing on Thursday night, or they start thinking we're paying Aaron Rodgers how much for this? The Jets, though, do have a real quality defense. So similar to this game, avoid the giveaway plays, right? Don't give up that one long touchdown pass. And the Jets offense shouldn't be very capable of putting up big points on the Texans. Conversely, I don't think, unless they spit the bit, the Jets defense, I wouldn't expect the Texans to go in there and do a whole bunch either. They load the box against Mixon. Still no Nico Collins. If you throw in no Stephon Diggs on top of that, at least Xavier Hutchinson with the one nice layout catch over the middle, a John Mechie sighting because CJ Stroud bought time and then found him for a completion on a scoring drive in the fourth quarter. But offensively, it's not Picasso-esque, but it's better than finger painting. And so here they are, 6-2, crossing over the halfway mark against the Jets. And as we set up the Colts game, the division race is pretty much over unless the Texans fall apart. At 6-2, if they go a mere 4-5 the rest of the way, which is certainly possible, Lions and Chiefs and Ravens,
yep.
A couple of other games. Beating the Jets isn't a given. But if the Texans go just 4-5, that's 10-7. The Colts have to go at least 7-2, right? The Texans win the tiebreaker now. Anyone think the Colts have any chance whatsoever to go 7-2? 3 of their next 4 opponents, Bills, Vikings, Lions. That's probably loss. So the Texans, it's all about looking ahead and getting that second seed, right? Not totally writing off the possibility of going ahead of the Chiefs, but look, they're the 2-time champions. They're 6-0 through 6 games. But if you have that number 2 seed, so you're not going to Baltimore in the division round, or Mile High if somehow Denver winds up with a good seed. It's all there for the Texans, but the offense is certainly leaking oil with personnel with the losses of Collins and we presume at least short-term Diggs.
Yeah, I'll have my eye on these other receivers, not Stephon Diggs, not Nico. Can CJ continue to spread the ball around while we wait to see what happens with Diggs and Collins comes back? Because Diggs, but today before he left, 5 catches, 81 yards, which is nice. What I really liked was 4 catches, 52 yards for Dalton Schultz. We've been saying this for a few weeks straight. You gave him all this money and he's been terrible at blocking. So why not have him run some routes and throw him the ball, especially when you're down some of your top targets? I also like 4 catches for Joe Mixon today, 32 yards. So that's something you got to do. If you're having some struggles with your receivers, get the ball to your tight end, get the ball to your running back. Some easy throws for Stroud there too, because those are throws where he can get the ball out of his hand a lot quicker, where he doesn't have to take so many hits. And we also saw them moving the pocket around quite a bit today, trying to find some kind of way to just give CJ a little bit more protection. So I think Hutchinson's going to be somebody. We even saw Robert Woods with 2 catches today. So they're going to have to make it work with these guys. And then, of course, penalties. We saw Tunsil back with another false start. And nothing too surprising there. But there were a few penalties that kind of hurt them. The one I can really think of that cost them points was they were offsides on a punt. And then that penalty allowed the Colts to put the offense back on the field. And then they pick up the first down after that. And they actually ended up getting a touchdown, but that got overruled by a pass interference penalty. But they ended up collecting a field goal on that as well. So there were a few little spots where the Texans, made a few mistakes, getting knocked out of field goal range or jumping off sides and then allowing them to pick up a first down and get some points there. So I'm excited about the win today, but point being, when you're playing a higher level of competition, those little mistakes can come back to bite you.
One thing I forgot to mention was when Richardson took himself out of the game after that sack late in the first half. I was concerned that the game would become more difficult with Joe Flacco in, because we know Flacco is a much more accurate passer than Richardson is right now. But Richardson was okay and was able to come back in and thankfully continued his trajectory with his completion percentage. So, guys, give me your MVP for the game. Before you guys give me yours, I want to invite everybody in the comment section who's watching, give us your MVP of the game for this big Texans win. Charlie, you go first.
I'm going to Danielle Hunter. Fourth quarter ability to rush the passer is just massive in this league. Danico Autry, again, quiet against one of his former teams in his second game. Danielle Hunter was very loud. Will Anderson is best supporting actor in the pass rush, but Hunter with a 2-sack game, but bringing it snap after snap in the fourth quarter. The Texans didn't beat the Colts a whole lot all the years that Andre Johnson was playing with them, but it just seemed appropriate the day Andre Johnson gets his ring that they spoil the former Colt, Andre Johnson's Colts side of the equation and get the win. And pet peeve, the Texans really, because it invites smart alecky stuff from people like, me. 80 players they invited to this game in honor of number 80. Stop calling them Texans legends. The Texans have nowhere close to 80 Texans legends. And I'm not going to name names of guys that welcome Texans legend, but it's just, come on. It just sounds silly. Call them former Texans. That will work. But Andre Johnson, I'm sure he would have slept just fine either way tonight. A glorious day for number 80 and a very good day for the Texans, unofficially clinching the AFC South.
Yeah, I'm going to stay there on the D-line and just go with Will Anderson. I mean, he was in on 7 tackles, forced fumble, the sack. And I loved how at the end of the game, credit to D'Amico calling a timeout for that final play before the final play of the game. Then they line up like 3 rushers on the Colts' right side of their offensive line formation and then just bombard them all. And then Will Anderson, instead of going up the field towards the quarterback, he kind of went directly down the line of scrimmage and was able to get Richardson right there and get some quick pressure on him, especially for how outmatched they were numbers wise. But I thought that was really smart, D'Amico. Just overload that one side and then have kind of everybody else back. And Will Anderson was there very fast, put some pressure on him, and that was it at the end of the game. I think he ended up recovering that fumble as well at the end.
You guys go defense, and obviously Joe Mixon was huge. And it's so odd. Last season, it was the passing game that bailed out the run game. This season, it's been Joe Mixon that has kept the offense on the field, gaining big yards on the ground, while the passing game is still trying to figure it out with the protection issues. Charlie, you mentioned the poise factor. That brings me to my MVP, which is CJ Stroud, making lemonade basically all day. And, despite getting flushed out of the pocket, he was just having to make things happen and really did show poise. And even with that errant toss back to Mixon that resulted in the turnover, I thought Mixon did a great job in doing what he was given and wasn't really given much, but was able to do enough to get this important win. It's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. Like we mentioned, we're going to be back on Monday to preview Jets Texans. 3 of us also host an Astros podcast called Stone Cold Stros. You can find that on our other YouTube channel, Sports Map Houston. So keep an eye out for that on Monday as well. And until next time, go Texans.